In the last lecture, we learned that when we use Mongo shell, it treats all numbers like double and it sends the number as double to MongoDB server. So that number will always be stored as double type in MongoDB. Let's go to Mongo shell. And here currently I'm in the eShopping database. What I'll do is I'll switch to sample database. For that I can use this use command and specify the database name. So now I'm in the SampleDB database. Let me go ahead and let me clear the shell. And what I want is, let's say I want to have a test collection. Currently it is not present. And in that I want to insert one document. So for that I'm using this insert one command. And in that document, let's say I want to have a name field. Let's say name is John. And I want to have an age field. Let's say age is 28. Now here we are assigning an integer value 28 to this age field. But in Mongo shell, every number is treated as floating point number. So here this number 28, it will not be treated as an integer value. Instead, it will be treated as a floating point number. And when we are sending this command to MongoDB server, there that floating point number will be stored in double type. So if I go ahead and if I press enter, the document has been inserted. Let me go ahead and let me query the test collection. And in there you'll see we have one document where we have name field and age field. And here it looks like that the age is storing an integer value, this value 28, but that is not the case. Behind the scenes, this age is storing a floating point number, a number with some decimal points. So behind the scenes, this 28 will be stored in MongoDB as something like this. So since it is stored as double type, there will be some imprecision while storing this number as double. Okay, so always remember that when we store a double type, a floating point number in double type, there we might have some imprecision like this. Okay, so this is just an example here. All right, now what if instead of storing this number as double in MongoDB server, I want to store it as integer value? In that case, we have a method called numInt. So first what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I will delete all the documents from this test collection. Currently we have only one document, but still I'm using this delete many, and I'll pass an empty filter object. If I press enter, all the documents should be deleted. Let's go ahead and let's insert this document one more time. But this time I don't want to store this number 28 as double type in MongoDB server. Instead, I want to store this 28 as an integer value. And for that, what we can do is we can use a method called number int, and we can pass this 28 to this number int. And in this way, this number int will make sure that this 28, it is treated as an integer value and it is stored as an integer value in MongoDB server. You can also pass a number as a string here, something like this. So in that case, this number int will convert that string value to integer type. If you pass any improper string which cannot be converted to number type, in that case, that value will be converted to 0. And I'll show you that in a bit. But here to this number int, you can pass the number as a string value, or you can pass it normally. In that case, that number will be a double. So you can pass a double value to this number int. And from that double, it will extract the integer value and it will store it. Okay. If I go ahead and if I press enter, you will see that the document has been inserted. Let's go ahead and let's query that document. And there again, you will see that age is storing a value 28, an integer value 28. But this time it is storing an integer value and not a double value. In the previous case, where we simply assigned 28 to this age field, there that 28 was treated as double type and it was stored as double. So in MongoDB server, when it was stored, it had some decimal points. But now when we are inserting this 28, first we are converting it to integer type and then we are assigning it to the age field. So now when this 28 will be stored in MongoDB server, it will not have any decimal points and it will be treated as an integer value and it will be stored in int32 data type. Another thing which you need to remember is when we did not converted this number 28 to integer type, so that time it was stored as double in MongoDB server, right? So when it was stored as double in MongoDB server, there it was stored with 8 bytes of memory, because when we store a number in double type, it stores it in 8 bytes of memory. But here when we converted it to integer type and we stored it in int32, there the same number 28 is stored using 4 bytes of memory. So this is also something which you need to understand. Alright, so this is how we can store an integer value from Mongo shell in the MongoDB server by using this numInt. Using this numInt, we can convert a string value or a decimal value to integer type, and we can pass it to MongoDB server to store it as integer value. But what about the very large numbers? So for example, again, let me go ahead and let me delete all the documents from the test collection. And let's go ahead and let's try to insert a new document. And here what I'll do is I'll call this field as large integer. Okay. And in this field, I want to store a very large integer number. So for example, something like this. Okay. Now this value here, this integer value, it will not fit in int32 data type because it is out of the range of int32 data type, right? So in that case, what will happen? If I try to store this integer value in int32, what will happen? Let's see that. Let's try to insert this document, and you will see that we have not got any error and the document was inserted properly. Now let's go ahead and let's query this document. And in there you will see that this large integer is storing a completely different value. Instead of storing this large integer value, it is storing a completely different value. So since this integer value cannot fit in int32 data type, a completely different value is saved here. Let me also show you this with the maximum value allowed for the integer number. So this is the range for int32. This is the minimum value which you can store in int32 data type, and this is the maximum value which you can store in int32 data type. So let me clear this shell. Let me go ahead and let me delete all the documents. And let's go ahead and let's insert a document one more time. And this time I'm going to store this value. So this is the maximum integer value allowed for int32. So let me go ahead and let me remove this value and add this maximum value which is allowed in int32. If I go ahead and if I press enter, if I run this command and if we query the collection, you will see that same number is saved here. Okay, but let me try to again insert a new document, but now instead of 47 I'll say 48, and this 48 is out of the range of this maximum value allowed in int32. So the maximum value allowed is this value. To that we have added 1, and now we want to store this value in int32. So let's see what happens in this case. If I go ahead and if I press enter and if we query the collection, you will see we have two documents, and in the second document, instead of storing this value 2147483648, it has stored a negative value, and this negative value is basically the minimum value which int32 stores. So here the overflow has happened. Since 2147483648, it cannot be stored in this range and it is just one greater than the maximum value, it saved the minimum value. If I try to save an integer value which is 2 greater than the maximum range, so for example 49, and if I go ahead and if I press enter and if we query the collection, now you will see that the second negative value has been stored. So this is -2147483648. This is the minimum value. The next minimum value will be 47. So now that is being stored here. Instead of storing this value, which is not in the range of int32, it overflowed and it saved the negative value, which is second to the minimum value allowed in int32. Okay, so we cannot store any integer number out of the range of int32. any number which is equal to or greater than this value, or which is equal to or less than this value. Only those integer numbers can be stored in int32. Any integer number which is out of this range cannot be stored in int32. And that's why for that we have long type. So let me go ahead and let me again delete all the documents from this collection. Let me clear this shell. And now let's go ahead and let's insert this value which is out of the range of int32, but this value falls in the range of int64. That means in the range of long data type. So instead of converting it to int32, we will convert it to int64. And for that we have another method called number long. Let's go ahead and let's insert this document. If I press enter, and here you can see we have a warning for number long, and it says specifying a number as argument is deprecated and may lead to loss of precision. Pass a string value instead. So here we can also pass a string value to this number long. That string value should be a number wrapped within double quotes. But here, since the document has already been inserted, let's go ahead and let's query the collection. And in here you will see that that number is stored as long type. So here you can see long. This basically tells that this value here, it is stored in long data type. Okay, now what does this warning saying? This warning is saying that to this number long, we should be passing a string value and not a number. Because as we have learned, numbers are treated as double in Mongo shell. And when a number is treated as double, that number will have some decimal points and it will also have some imprecision. So to accommodate all that, when that value, that decimal will be converted to long type, it might give us some unexpected result. Okay, so what we should be doing is, if we want to insert a number in long type, for example, let's say 50, we should be passing it as string value. So from that string value, the integer number will be extracted and it will be saved in the long data type. But when we don't pass it as a string value, in that case, that number will be treated as double. In that double, we will have some decimal values and we'll also have some imprecision. And because of that, it can lead to some unexpected result. All right, so now if we go ahead and if we run this command, the document has been inserted. You will not see any warning message here. And also, if we query the collection, we have two documents and the value is saved correctly. It is saved in long data type and there is no difference in the value which we have inserted. Okay, so here it looks like it is storing a string value, but that is not the case. This value here, it is stored as an integer value in long data type. Now what will happen if you try to insert a document where you're using this number long to convert a numeric value to integer type, but there instead of passing a proper string value, you have passed some string value which cannot be converted to number type. For example, hello. In this case, since this hello cannot be converted into an integer type, this number long, it will return 0. Let me actually show you that. If I press enter, you will not see any errors. The document has been inserted. But if we query the document, for the third document, you will see that it is storing an integer value 0. So since this hello, this string cannot be converted into a proper integer type, this number long has returned 0 for this. It did not throw any error. Instead, it returned 0 for this string value, and that has been stored in MongoDB server. All right. So this is how we can store numbers as int32 or int64 from Mongo shell using number int and number long methods. So when we use number int and number long method, it converts a string value or a double value to integer type, and then it is stored as an integer value in MongoDB server. This is all from this lecture. If you have any questions, then feel free to ask it. Thank you for listening and have a great day.